Okay.
Probably waiting for Nick.
Wait.
A further question in principle on carry forwards. What's the situation with the provision for East Coast Rail?
The provision for East Coast Rail is already in the long-term plan. Oh, you mean the 14-15?
Well, I mean the 4.5 or whatever, less whatever we've spent.
So it's only low.
Where is that?
No, it's got the funding.
Oh, okay.
Hmm?
Is it going to be carried forward?
Yeah, it's capital, but Councillor Dick is... Yeah.
Sorry, I'd rather hear from staff.
Well, it's an investment capital. I'm just thinking of why it's not on the list. It's an investment capital, so I mean, there's always fluctuations in investment. If the project is going through a long-term plan, it's an estimate of what is to be spent in each year. I mean, the total quantum of the project is still stated in the long-term plan.
Okay. Well,
and we have another month to spend it. I guess it won't be spent now. But I mean, it won't be. But estimating what will be spent and what won't be spent. I mean, the long-term plan has put 5.5 million aside, and if that's needed, then it will be available. It's available out of funding.
and it'll be carry forward.
It'll be the funding is in the plan. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions on this? Well, I suggest we start the hearing. So we've got our first submitters here, which is the Hawke's Bay District Health Board. Morning, Mr. Jones, Tidswell. I'm going to set this thing up if I can. Pardon me?
Chairman, this sheet, each one of them indicates the submission number, doesn't it? This is number 22?
Yes.
Yes.
So just so we're clear, councillors and Mr. Mohi, we're here to consider and listen to and consider submissions, and the first one is the District Health Board. There is a receives and considers the verbal and written submissions. There you go. And the first one is these guys. Good morning, welcome. You know the drill. I'll hit that and the floor's yours.
Thanks, Fenton. And I'm joined today by Shari, who's our Health Promotions Manager.
Good morning.
So you've got our submission. It's pretty self-evident, I think. We're here mainly to answer questions. I do want to mention a couple of things around water, and I think Shari's going to talk about housing. On the water side, there's a couple of things that we've brought to your attention. One is an issue to do with, I think, small communities and the reliability and quality of their drinking water. And I noticed in the officer's comments that it's been noted this is a district council concern, and that's true to some extent, but I think this is actually a concern for all of us because a lot of these communities are among our more needy communities, and as we have more climate change and more periods of prolonged drought, we believe that there will be more pressure on the drinking water supplies of these communities. So what we're actually asking for council to do is to work with us and local authorities, and in fact we have got some scientific advice from ESR to try and identify those communities that are most at need and think about how we can actually increase their resilience. There's also some points in there about recreational water quality, which we work very closely with you on, and trying to remediate some of those very poor sites. Shari, do you want to talk about that?
On a similar kind of theme, we acknowledge the work that you've been doing around housing and trying to increase the quality of housing, mostly through insulation. And I agree with the councillor's the officer's comments about the fact that it needs to be a cross-sector approach, but we'd like to continue to see engagement from the regional council rather than a stepping back, that we all step up in terms of addressing housing, in terms of outcomes for children. It's one of the greatest impacts. And we know from the outcomes of our equity report, we have considerable inequalities around health outcomes, particularly for children in our community. And improving the quality of houses is a really effective tool. We, like yourselves, I'm sure, are disappointed that the legislation that was being proposed around warranted fitnesses for rentals and things has been taken off the agenda for a while. And so I think we have to look at a local response, which means everybody who has a part to play stepping up and working in that particular area. Also wanted to acknowledge the considerable work that you do around transport strategy and applaud that, and look forward to continuing to work, particularly Nick and others in that area. So yeah, those were the two things that we'd brought up. And any questions?
Thank you, Councillor Balfour.
Yeah, I'm not sure how all this is paginated, but in your summary here on item 6.1, which relates to housing, I was surprised you have a very precise number, that there are 531 homes in Hawke's Bay that have no heating source at all. And
That
so
was from the census.
That's the census data, so we can get very, very precise on that. So it talks about when you answer your census information, it asks you for sources of heating, and so we can actually give
would you happen
the
to
most.
know,
That is the most accurate data that we have.
would you happen to know how many of those are rentals?
It's not recorded in the census,
No.
No.
Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Scott.
I can start with water, and I do later have a question on the housing too. But in fact, this is a question for Dr. Jones. In the past, during drought conditions, are you aware of any, or at any time, drought or no drought, of public water supplies other than rainwater supplies that have been affected for either quality or inability to provide adequate potable water?
It would be some of the surface supplies of the smaller communities where they might have got down to.
Can you identify any of those communities?
I know that they've got pretty close in Wairua at times with they get to the point where they have one of the things they're trying to do in Wairua is actually build increased storage, so that when they get very low flows, they actually have capacity to deal with that. They actually also get a problem there with very high flows and high turbidity, and that overwhelms their system. But so it's not as simple as just drought. It's climate related. But I'm actually talking more about the supplies that are smaller than 25, and they're the ones that actually aren't on the register.
Yeah, I guess that's why I asked other than rainwater, because I know there is quality with that from time to time with avian contamination.
Yes.
Can I just ask a supplementary question, because I'm interested in that as well. Have you done any scoping work to find out approximately how many of these smaller communities might be affected by an unreliable water supply? That's
actually what we're proposing doing.
Yeah.
So you've got no idea of the size, the magnitude of the problem?
It's actually quite hard to get the information. I mean, we're approaching all the councils to see if they can assist with providing information. We do have all of the registered supplies, but any supplies, I think it's less than 250 people aren't actually required to register unless they are serving the community in some way through a community purpose building. And then the ones that are less than 25 aren't required to register at all. So, but some of these are places like schools. Some of them may be marae. There has been quite a lot of work done on trying to get better water supplies for marae, not just for drinking water reliability, but also for firefighting. So I think the first step is to try and get better quality information about the problem, and then I think as a region, because we know we're going to be looking at more drought in the future, thinking about what we can do about it.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you very much for your submission. I'm also very interested in the small communities water thing, but I think that's been well and truly covered. I'm also interested in, and just recently saw some pretty terrible photos of a private rental in Flaxmere that was just mould all over the place. I'm just wondering, my question is, how active are you in creating an environment where we can have warrant of fitnesses for houses?
We've we pushed very, very hard for the warrant of fitnesses for houses because partly it's a motivating factor for engaging landlords. Like they actually then realise that it's part of their responsibilities to actually engage to deal with those things. We run 2 programs, but mostly via the rheumatic fever program that we have, because obviously it's one thing to swab kids' throats and fix the bugs. The bit that actually prevents it is getting better quality housing, and so we do some work with insulation and curtain banks and things. But we feel that there needs to be a much more systematic approach because there is a reasonable amount of service around and just making sure that everything lines up. But we do continue to push for the warrant of fitness. I agree, some of the houses that our assessors have walked into are similar, and we know that that has a direct impact on those children, mostly children, but vulnerable, people with vulnerable health.
And I think from our role is really primarily to recognise the illness. As a clinical service, we see children coming into hospital with conditions that are clearly moisture and mould related. And when that does occur, we try to refer them through to a housing agency to try and get some action. But I guess what we're talking about today is a more sort of generic problem to do with, the market for housing in New Zealand and in Hawke's Bay in particular. And I suppose, if you like, a failure on the part of the market to actually deliver the quality of housing that we think we need. It's a big problem. I mean, it's a national problem, but I guess what we're interested in is continuing to discuss with all the relevant agencies what we can do at the local level.
I don't think that's good enough. Somebody needs to be a coordinator in this, and do you think that the health board has a role to help coordinate this so that we do actually see some action instead of us all just sitting back and saying this is the market economy and bad luck? Do you think you have a role to play, a leadership role?
What we've have proposed is actually one of the difficulties about one agency taking the lead is that often that means a bit of stepping off by other agencies. And so we have proposed taking it to the cross-sector forum to actually get some level of engagement right across the board, because we know that no one of us can actually solve the problem by ourselves. You're right, there does need to be coordination, and we do need to be working together, and it's not necessarily just sort of government, local government kind of agencies that need to be involved here. We have a number of social service providers, and also people like landlords associations and others also need to be engaged with this. So, for example, we do have a fund where we do assist people who presented with health issues, and one of the difficulties we have often is actually getting to the landlord to get consent to put the insulation in. So there's a little bit of a breakdown in communication in that area as well. But yes, agreed, it does need coordination, but I'd actually like it coordinated across a range of organisations rather than just one organisation being seen as responsible for it, because it does tend to mean that people do drop off from that.
Thank you. Yeah, time is up. Thank you very much for your very fulsome submission. And you will hear from us in due course. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have now on our diary here an internal submission, but I think we have Forest and Bird. Are they here?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just clarify a process issue. It's a bit hard to actually find the submission. There seem to be 2 numbering systems. I don't know what this I-21 or I-45 means. Can you, at the start of each one, can you possibly give us and particularly given that there were 6 batches that came out?
Which batch and which page?
Yes.
All right, I'll
Mr.
endeavour to do that.
Mr.
Thank
Chairman, what I might do is, while you were discussing this, just put up each part on the whiteboard and the submission numbers that relate to that, because they are done chronologically, but at least then you can go straight to the part that you need to. And then on the front cover of that, is the actual page number that it's in, hopefully.
Bellow it out. There we go. So we've got the Central Hawke's Bay branch of Forest and Bird. Mr. Bell, are you? Okay, I've got Bell here for some reason, but that's fine. Thank you, guys. That's not right. Dan Elderkamp. That's Mr. Elderkamp, yeah. Good morning and welcome. Now the process is pretty straightforward, 10 minutes to present. If you wish to take questions, please allow us some time in your presentation for us to ask you questions. So, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you first of all for the opportunity to speak to our submission. I'm Dan Elderkamp, the co-chair of the Central Hawke's Bay branch of Forest and Bird, and this is Grenville Christie, who is the other co-chair of Central Hawke's Bay Forest and Bird. You will have our submission in front of you, so I won't read the whole document. I'll just speak to a few of the items there. And there are three that I just briefly want to talk to. The first one is point number 3, developing our economy. And I'll just read that one. We have reservations about continued investment in the Rotana for water storage scheme, but support investment in the Port of Napier. We are concerned about growth when it leads to degradation of water quality, such as the RWSS and the Tuki catchment. We do, however, support reliable, well-organised water supply that helps us grow sustainably. To achieve that goal, we would support measures that would ensure a hierarchical approach to granting water consents. The criteria should include industries that use the least water and use it most efficiently, industries which create wealth that stays within the community, that employ local people at living wage rates, that have the lowest carbon footprint, do the least environmental damage, that the highest users have the shortest period to hold consents before being reviewed, as they may not be reviewed if a more efficient low water use comes along. Long-term consents be issued to those businesses which comply most with the criteria. With these goals in place, expensive dams like the RWSS will not need to be built. For example, a vineyard uses 4 litres or less of water to make a bottle of wine, whereas 1,000 litres of water is needed to make 1 litre of milk. We further advocate a sinking lid policy for high-use industries like dairy, which would lead to the aquifer not being over-allocated. We support reinstatement of the Napier-Gisborne railway line. We also support the use of the Takapau-Napier railway line for the transport of logs from Tararua district to Port of Napier instead of State Highway 2. And at that point you will have read and heard about the controversy in Waipukara at the moment with the increased transport of logs coming up in the near future, with trucks driving through the town. So that is a pertinent issue with us. Regarding the Rotana for water storage scheme, we also want the council to consider alternatives to the scheme, which is probably a bit down the track anyway, but some of you may have heard about Doug Avery, who farms in Marlborough and has developed a very robust and drought-resistant method of farming. And so our contention is that you don't need a dam to drought-proof Hawke's Bay. There are other alternatives available that should be given serious consideration. I'd also like to talk to point number 8, which is on the biodiversity strategy. And here we commend the Regional Council for its role in the preparation of a regional biodiversity strategy. However, we consider the proposed $40,000 per annum for implementing the strategy as being grossly insufficient to meet the region's biodiversity needs, which we feel should be closer to $400,000 per annum. And we're very happy with the measures that have been taken so far to get a biodiversity strategy developed and implemented, but we feel that, as it says here, that the amount currently proposed is really far too little, considering the threat to our biodiversity at the moment and how much of that biodiversity has disappeared over the decades past. We should really put a lot of effort into getting some of that biodiversity restored and upgraded. Also locally, that second paragraph, Lake Whaatuma, our ecological gem in Central Hawke's Bay, is crying out for help with significant willow and animal pest control to halt the degradation of its ecological values. We also consider our braided riverbeds, which is the Tukituki and Waipawa, require more sensitive management during riverbed root raking to avoid the breeding season for ground nesting threatened dotterels. And what comes to mind here is something akin to peka peka, which we consider as a wonderful job well done. And Lake Whaatuma, or Lake Hatuma as you would know it, is just crying out for something like that. And local residents around the lake have started with that, and they really need your help with that. Yep. And then lastly, pest control, we support that. We'd really like to see that continue because we've noticed certainly in Central Hawke's Bay that there have been more dead possums on the road, so the threat is not diminishing. It is in fact ever present. And now I'll hand over to Grenville for his part. Thanks, Mayor.
Well, I just want to probably back up some of those other things. As I say, an issue for us was some of these logging trucks rolling through residential streets, and my street, which had 2 activists in it, suddenly had about 20, you know, which will disappear back into the fold as things haven't really changed that much. It's just that our street's not going to be the #1 street. But the issue still remains, and it's not just logging trucks, there's more and more big trucks. They're getting bigger every day and they're rolling through towns, and climate change is a reality, unless you believe there's a conspiracy of all the major scientists in the world, which is highly unlikely. So just looking on the economies of fuel, the burning of carbons, rail, and I'm great that you talk about Gisborne Rail, but we've got to talk about rail and of course coastal shipping. We've got to look at low carbon footprint, reduced use of fuel to move mass goods, and I urge that the Regional Council carry on with its leadership role pursuing these particular goals. And as far as the issues about water and the Ruataniwha Plains, it's really, really interesting. I mean, for example, on my street, our road, there's a small water pipe. The council gave some people, as they came on, first serve, 300 cubic metres of water, and those people, as they came on later, got nothing, whereas a sensible thing would have been to say, well, look, you can have 300 cubic metres now, but you might end up one day with a trickle supply because there's all these other people in line here. And to some extent, that stimulates those thoughts about how we should be looking at water in general, rather than saying here's an industry which uses a massive amount of water, so we need more and more water to keep that industry going. As I say, 1,000 litres of water for 1 litre of milk versus grapes, 4 litres max normally, and a lot of that water is simply winter water for frost control, and the drips really don't need to go on that often in summer. Roots go down, way down for grapes. Interestingly, I was talking to a grape grower about this. A guy had been in the business for 135 years, and he was saying, no, well, you don't really need a dam, you're right, it's just a few drops for this sort of thing. But he said down in Ruataniwha Plains, he said he wouldn't do either. He said because infrastructure costs, whether it be dairy or anything with a big infrastructure cost, which you have to set up to use water, it's not the climate that's likely to kill you, it's the fickle markets. Just look at our poor asparagus growers, and it happens all the time. Look at dairy today. I was talking to another friend the other day, families been farming in Central Hawke's Bay for just about forever, and he said, well, what his father said was, if you go sheep, beef, you got wool, lamb, beef, 3 options, you're not big water users. And interesting study by Lincoln and Canterbury showed sheep and beef put more funding into local economies than dairy or cropping. So I'd just like to, I guess, leave those thoughts with you. Water, as I say, is that major issue. We read in the paper here with the water bottling, and of course it's all about plastics as much as water. And I think it's timely that how we hand out consents is really put on the table, and there's a really good discussion about that, because it's crazy. Some people can just get a lot of water and other people get none, and some of those people who put it on with a drop rather than a fire hose could do a lot better with it. So I'll just, I suppose, leave it there. Don't stand in the doorways, don't block up the doors. The times are changing, that's what I say. Thank you. We'd love to take questions.
In the 19 seconds.
You've got one question, Councillor Hewitt. Yeah.
I'm interested if you guys have had a discussion on the tourism and the huge increase that's proposed within the submission documents.
Well, I'm really interested in
not
tourism.
really. Yeah.
And I think that tourism has great potential. In fact, if we could get rail working, and if we could get a few passenger train wagons connected on occasionally from Wellington, I think, man, what an opportunity to bring people down, not just for Art Deco. Something's happening in Central Hawke's Bay, so it links in with that whole rail thing for me.
If I can just add something to that, I think Central Hawke's Bay does have a lot more potential for tourism activities, especially for farming operations. I think the cruise liner market, there's an obvious potential that there could be trips from Napier, from the cruise liners to Central Hawke's Bay. So yes, there's a lot of potential there.
Thank you. We're out of time, guys. Thank you very much for your submission, and we will be in touch in due course. Thank you.
Cheers.